Tonight, Jon Stewart makes the brave claim that people in positions of authority need to be held to higher standards. Superman Wonder Woman shows us that it's never a good time meeting the girlfriend's family. And if there's one thing you can trust in Suicide Squad, it's that you can't trust Harley Quinn. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 115 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and I have very quickly realized that I have no idea how to structure this show anymore. I'm at a loss. So for anybody who's been watching me for a while, hi, thanks for tuning back in. But you'll know that when I started this show, I had a very rigid structure, and that is I went with Batman first, because I know that's half the reason that anyone is even here. Then I went Superman, Green Lantern, Justice League, and this is family of comics, by the way. The Edge, Young Justice, and then the Dark comics, aka, Constantine, Animal Man, Swamp Thing. And that was good. That worked. And then they introduced miniseries. So I was like, okay, miniseries go at the very end. I can put them there. No problem. And then the events started happening, and I was like, all right, well, events should go at the beginning of the show, because that's even more of a reason that somebody would tune in. It's like, hey, what in the hell is the culling? Why should I care? And the answer is you shouldn't, but I'm going to put it up front to say that you shouldn't. But now we've reached such a vague period of DC Comics that I don't know how to put things together anymore. So, like, Forever Evil is going on. That is an event. That is definitively an event. But Justice League of America is technically a tie-in to Forever Evil. However, it's like 7 tie-ins in a row. Does that even really count as tie-ins anymore if it's just a storyline in the book? I don't know. And then Zero Year, I don't think Zero Year is an event at all. I don't see it as such. It's a story arc. But this month specifically, there are a bunch of Zero Year tie-ins. Do those count? Is that something that should go at the front of the show? Should I wait until it's after Batman? What happens when Batman doesn't come out that week? I don't have answers. So from now on, or at least for this month, I'm just kind of winging it. I'm just throwing things together where they feel like they should go. If you don't like the order of things, I'm sorry. That's what the description is for. You are free to skip around. Please don't, though, because audience retention for this show is not great. You guys all seem to really skip over Superboy, and I don't blame you, but, I have to sit through that. So do you. And this week it's an event, so you really need to be sitting through it. Anyway, that's enough rambling for me. In no particular order, how about I tell you the comics that are coming out this week? This week we have Forever Evil Arkham War, Batman, Batgirl, Nightwing, Superboy, Superman Wonder Woman, Green Lantern Corps, Justice League of America, Justice League of America's Vibe, Katana, World's Finest, Suicide Squad, and Constantine. Notable ones out of that: Batgirl, Nightwing, and Green Lantern Corps are all Zero-Year tie-ins. Again, isn't an event, doesn't really matter. Justice League of America is a tie-in to Forever Evil, as is, of course, Forever Evil Arkham War. I believe Suicide Squad is a tie-in to Forever Evil as well. But then the big one is Superboy, which is part 2 of Krypton Returns, which 2 weeks ago I had to buy part 1 off eBay because I realized I didn't have it in any of my trades. Thanks for that again, DC, but now we got part 2, and let me tell you, it does not justify the purchase. So yeah, that's all on the docket. Nothing more to really say but to get into it. Again, I don't know what I'm starting with, so check out this. Forever Evil Arkham War number 2, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Scot, Eaton. So last issue, Bane took over Blackgate, the Arkham Asylum inmates have taken over the rest of Gotham, and Bane wants to take over the rest of the city using the talons that are frozen beneath Blackgate. So we open up with one of Bane's goons ripping apart Man-Bat's army, because I guess he now just has an army of Man-Bats where he is cognizant enough to be a leader. I thought for sure he had gone feral, but regardless, he's like, yeah, well, It's all part of our plan. Go in there. We only have like a few dozen of us, but it's enough for the plan to work. So we see essentially they have this high-tech weaponry along with normal guns that they're attacking all of Bane's men with, and then they pick up the big guy Brute and just lift him up in the sky, impale him with this big machine-looking thing, and then drop him back down. And it's like, all right, anybody who's still alive, crawl back to Blackgate and give Bane a message. Science is going to win this one. So we then cut to Gordon and Detective Pierce, who are hiding out inside of a food truck, looking for any sort of food they can get. And Gordon's like, yeah, look, here's the thing. I know you're kind of new to the force. Gotham has gone through a lot of these, like, apocalypse sort of things. It's pretty much a typical Wednesday, but it's still something that we know how to deal with, and we are going to get through it. And Pierce is like, okay, well then what's the plan? And he's like, all right, here are the blueprints to Blackgate Prison. We're going to do something really stupid because I think the warden, who we had named was Zorbatos, she's still alive in there. So next we have Bane meeting up with Penguin, and Penguin's like, hey, Bane, I, as mayor of the city, have cleaned up all of your dead goons. Just letting you know, there's a lot of dead goons. And he's like, yes, all right, Penguin, let's have a talk. And they basically just talk back and forth where Bane's like, look, Penguin, I know that you're not on the Arkham Asylum side, but you're also not on the Blackgate side. You're like running right down the middle here. And he's like, yeah, that's what I do. I'm a individual capitalist. I do, that's good business. And Bane's like, all right, so here's the thing. You know that I can make this work for you. Like, this city, if it's run by the crazies, is not going to be good business for you. I'll take over. It'll be under my iron will, and then, you'll still have a seat at the table, more or less. And Penguin's like, all right, I'll give you whatever you need to take out the asylum people. However, one of your Blackgate guys is Emperor Penguin, who was one of my goons that over in Detective Comics I had a real beef with. He's got to die. And Bane's like, yeah, no, that's fine. I don't even know him, but I swear to God, I will kill him just as soon as I get back. And he's like, all right, in return for that, there's something you need to know. You're kind of being sold up the river. And immediately Bane starts like threatening Cobblepot, just being like, tell me what you mean, what's going on? And he reveals that, yeah, we all know that you wanted Blackgate for the Talons underneath. Everyone in the city knows that. And because you're not there right now, the Arkham inmates are going to basically take that away from you. So Bane then runs off and is going to deal with that. And then Penguin walks over to the food truck where Gordon is and just is like, hey, Gordon, I got a proposition for you and your partner here. And we cut back to Blackgate and we see full chaos is breaking out. It's all of the Arkham inmates versus all the Blackgate inmates. And the warden is tied up in the middle of things, but is otherwise being ignored. And turns out that the deal that Penguin was offering was basically saying, hey, right now is your only real chance to go and get her. So go do it. So Gordon and Pierce rush in. They manage to grab Zorbatos. They all put on Blackgate prison inmate outfits so that they can blend in better. And then they start making their escape. But we see that the Arkham inmates are like, hey, does anybody know if Scarecrow is done yet? Because we're like barely holding on against these Blackgate people. And we see Scarecrows down below basically taking all the Talons off of their special little power grid and is going to have the Man-Bat army carry them away one by one to a separate location that Bane won't know about. But of course, Bane shows back. He just grabs Scarecrow, throws him down on the ground, being like, all right, Scarecrow, you're a piece of crap, but you're not going to take my Talons. And all the Man-Bats start to fly away. Seems that almost all of them get away, but the main one that was carried by Kirk Langstrom, he manages to get grabbed by Bane, so that Talon is still left, and he's like, all right, this one's mine, I'm going to take care of this, and then I'm coming back to crush you and Scarecrow's heads. So Gordon makes his way out along with his partner and Zorbatos, and they hop into one of the few working cars just because it's so old. It doesn't have any technology in it that's been taken off the grid. And Zarbatos is like, oh, but what about my partner, my second in command, Donald? How could I lose him? How could I leave him behind? And Gordon starts the car, and then immediately Bane just drops Donald onto the hood of the car and just like, hey, you and I want the same thing for the moment. So here's Donald. And Bane just walks away. And Gordon's like, that seems very ominous. So, yeah, that's the end of the issue. I like it. I'm not saying I dislike it. That hesitation as I was thinking of what to say. It's just, I'm not sure what the structure is here yet. I'm not sure which side is the side that, I mean, not that every story needs a side that you should be rooting for, but I feel like in this vein, there's going to be at least one side that we see is the proper victor, like the side that it makes more sense to come out on top, and I'm not sure where we're going with that yet. Bane obviously has all of his plans, his machinations and whatnot, but even this early on, he's already being shown up by Scarecrow and Man-Bat, which just seems a little bit strange to me. Obviously, he managed to get one of the Talons back, but I don't know. There's just a lot going into it. And then add on top of it, I mean, the cover of the trade kind of spoils a lot, and I'm trying not to let that inflect things, but it's kind of hard to ignore. So all in all, I'm going to say this one's probably I'll give it like a 6.5. I'm waiting for the point where it just gets really into it, where it really sells me on like, yeah, this is this main reason why this book was written. This is the core plot that we're moving ahead with. And I'm just not getting that yet. Justice League of America number 9, written by Matt Kindt, art by Tom Derenick. So last issue, tie into Forever Evil, obviously. Last issue we had Martian Manhunter and Stargirl making their way deeper into a prison, or at least Martian Manhunter, and we left off finding that Green Lantern Simon Baz has seemingly killed a whole lot of people. Meanwhile, Stargirl has found an escape from the prison back up on the top side. So we see what happened with Simon, where he's flying around town with Green Lantern powers, and everyone's just like, oh, he's a terrorist. He should be in jail. Why does he get superpowers? And then he's like, all right, you know what? I can hear you. You want to see a terrorist? Fine. And then he blows up like the whole city. And Martian Manhunter's like, dude, none of this is real. None of those are real people. This is all just in your imagination. And he's like, oh, I just got so sick of them. And he's like, all right, well, this is a lost cause. Anyway, I'm going to head down to the next level now. So he goes down. And he starts losing his telepathic connection with Stargirl. She's like not able to hear him anymore. And he's telling her like, look, Stargirl, if you can hear me, do not come down here. Like, it's definitely not okay for you. She's like, okay, I can't hear you. I'm going to come down for you, okay? So next level down, he gets is full of like blood and guts and bones and human stuff. And we see Madame Xanadu has gone absolutely nuts. And she's like, well, I can't use any of my normal spells, so I gotta resort to dark magic. So, Hearts of Virgins and Blood of the Innocents, here we go. And he's just like, alright, this is a bit much even for me. I'm gonna head down to the next level. So, he continues down. Meanwhile, Stargirl is starting to make her way deeper down. She gets to Wonder Woman's level, and Wonder Woman's like, hey, you don't need to be here. The demons are coming. The battle's about to start. If you're looking for the hatch, it's over there. And she's like, oh, alright. Bye. And so she makes her way deeper down. And then we start getting the memory, the origin story, I guess, to Stargirl in this, where she's watching some cartoon while reading a book. Her mom comes in saying, hey, your stepdad's going to be home in like half an hour. Go and clean up the office of anything that she left in there. And as she makes her way in there, she finds that there's this box that's been left unlocked. And she's like, oh, what's this? But then we cut back to Martian Manhunter, who's made his way down into Aquaman's nightmare. And his nightmare is just the entirety of the oceans are gone. And all of the fish and whales and every bit of sea life is dead. And he's like, I knew those surface dwellers would do this. This is extinction. I am declaring war. and anything with two legs. And so Aquaman flies over to Martian Manhunter, tries to stab him with his trident. Manhunter's like, dude, you know that's not going to work on me. He's like, oh, yeah, no, of course it's not going to work on you because you're just so freaking great, aren't you? And he's like, what? Okay, Aquaman, this is literally all in your head. None of this is happening. And he's like, oh, yeah? Smell that. Smells like a rotten fish to me. How can you tell me that's not real? And then he just flies off again. And Martian Manhunter's like, all right, I'm not that worried about Aquaman, so I'm going to go down into the next level, which I can already psychically feel is the final level. There's only one more down there. So we see Stargirl has made her way to Shazam's level, and Shazam's like, hey, you want to see a cool trick? And he picks up a car and throws it into a building, and just like, wasn't that awesome? And Stargirl's like, all right, I'm going to go now. And then she makes her way down into the next level. And then we get more of a continuation. She opens up the box, and inside is this, scepter thing, the star rod scepter. I don't know what it's called. Regardless, she puts on this costume that's also in there, and she realizes that she has the ability to, fly around with this. And as she's flying over the city of LA, she sees this big fire across town, and she's like, oh, I can be a hero. I'm going to go be a hero. So she flies over to help with that. Meanwhile, as Manhunter is down in the bottom layer, he sees this shadowy figure that he's been following ever since the beginning, and he's like, it's you! You're the last person down here. Who are you? And he's like, don't you like this place? There's all this fire and stuff. This is your hell, John. And so Martian Manhunter flies over and finds out that the person who he's been following this whole time is himself. And his other says, yeah, you tap into everyone's minds and you act like it's not such a big deal. But it's the whole reason why this prison was able to be made in the first place, is that you've been tapping into their minds like it's no big deal and learning all of their fears and stuff. And we also know about your fears as well. And he explains that his psyche is broken in two, and that's why he feels less powerful and blah, blah, blah. Whole thing of oh, yeah, you were too late to save your planet and it burned, and now fire is your weakness because of that, and blah, blah, blah. So he basically says, you're down here, you're powerless to stop this. That is your greatest nightmare. And then we see Stargirl just passing by the rest of them, trying to get down to John. And John is saying but here's the thing. All of the people that you've made prisons for is based off of their greed or their fear or their anger or whatever like that. But I know there's one superhero who isn't based on any of that stuff. And then me personally, I was like, Shazam? And I was like, no, not Shazam. He's just too much of a kid. But then we get the more backstory to Stargirl as the narration continues and shows that she goes in and she saves people's lives from this fire. Turns out it was set by an arsonist, and she manages to get the arsonist as well. And she's like, hey, I did it. I got him. And she's just so innocent about the whole thing. And it turns out that Stargirl is the one that's going to be able to save all this because she's just that good. She's that optimistic that things are going to be okay, that there's no way that the prison of her mind could ever hold her. So she finally makes it down into Manhunter's nightmare, his prison, whatever you want to call it. She blasts one of the Manhunters and then grabs the other one, which I don't know if she grabbed the right one, but regardless, she then starts just flying upwards. She's able to blast through all the prisons super easily. But as she gets up to the top layer, she wakes up and says, hey, we're out, but I've got a killer headache. And as she looks around, Jean is no longer there physically, but she still has a telepathy, a mental link. And she looks around and sees Deathstroke, Giganta, Copperhead, Shadow Thief, and I think Blockbuster are all there. And Deathstroke's like, oh, we thought you were dead, or all you heroes were dead, but you will be in a second. So I don't know what the hell's going on. I mean, clearly this was a mental prison to some extent, but Stargirl, because she was able to look out of it from the last issue, I don't think she was ever actually in it. And we also established, I think it was in Justice League or maybe it was Forever Evil. Regardless, all the heroes were imprisoned inside of Deathstorm. So I also don't understand what's happening here, but I'm sure we'll get clarification as it goes on. In the meantime, this might have some crossover with Forever Evil Argus, because that's the last place I saw all of these villains together. So, yeah, a lot of moving parts with Forever Evil. All in all, I'd say this issue, it feels like it was meant to be linked in with just the last issue as well, because it doesn't feel like it's really doing that much on its own. compared to the last issue, but altogether it's got a decent message, I guess, of, oh no, Stargirl, she's the one who can save all of this. So collectively, it's probably like a 7.5, but because this issue is on its own and it repeats so much of the first half, I can't really give it even a 7. I think it's much more like a 6.5. And that sucks because I've been looking forward to Stargirl's origins, and this kind of felt rushed because of the fact they had to show what the rest of the league's nightmares were. I don't know. I'm just kind of bummed out. So 6.5 is the highest I can really give it. Suicide Squad number 25, written by Matt Kindt, art by Patrick Zircher. This is another tie into Forever Evil, as was the last issue, where we wrapped up with there being two teams, one with Deadshot Harley and Captain Boomerang, the other with Power Girl Steel. God, who was that last guy? Power Girl, Steel, Unknown Soldier, and we got a name for the last guy that I thought was like Mad Dog or whatever. It turns out his name is Warrant. Never heard of him. So they were all going after OMAC, and both were sent by Amanda Waller, but it turns out it wasn't actually Amanda Waller. It was The Thinker. And we get an intro of this issue as, who the hell is The Thinker? And I'm just going to say straight up, way too much text. Like, so much of this is just narration boxes of the Thinker saying like, I'm so smart. You don't understand how smart I am. People think 20 moves ahead. I'm thinking years ahead because I'm so smart. So anyway, the Thinker is apparently just this guy who's really smart, and he has the body of like a 70-year-old, but that's only because his brain works so hard that his 25-year-old body has turned all frail and wrinkly because his brain works so hard. So he's managed to use a 3D hologram replica of Amanda Waller to go out and recruit people to basically get OMAC for himself, because that is the will of the crime syndicate, but he's got his own machinations years down the road. So we see the two teams are about to start fighting. Meanwhile, Harley and OMAC are kind of just holding back a little bit, getting loaded up into the ship. And as the fight starts breaking out, we see Power Girl breaks one of Deadshot's like wrist things. Captain Boomerang throws a flashbang boomerang. Steel grabs Captain Boomerang by the head and is about to like crush it. And Deadshot holds Steel at gunpoint saying, "Who sent you?" And then Steel's like, "I don't know. Who sent you?" And Unknown Soldier chimes in saying, "We were sent by Amanda Waller." Deadshot, who are you sent by? And he's like, "Amanda Waller." So immediately they all stop and just like, okay, hold on. Were we both sent by Amanda Waller? Is she that level of conniving? And immediately Deadshot and Captain Boomerang are like, yeah, that's kind of her whole thing. Unknown Soldier also kind of vouches for him and says, yeah, no, I was on the Suicide Squad. And I heard that Waller was recruiting heroes, which didn't make any goddamn sense to me. So I put myself out there to get recruited by her. And now we see that, yeah, her thing was probably just a hologram. And Steel's just like, all right, well, in that case, I'm not going to trust anybody here because I think you're all liars. And it's like, all right, well, fine. Let's just focus on the mission at hand, and then we'll figure out where we should even be delivering it to. Let's get OMAC. And they look around and it's like, oh, OMAC's gone, and so is Harley. And it turns out that Harley was specifically in contact via her little crime syndicate coin with the Thinker, he pointed out that everybody's kind of stupid. There's occasionally above average intelligence, but like they're all very predictable, except for Harley. She is completely unpredictable. And to someone like Thinker, he's like, God, I need that in my life. So he's recruited her and he instructed her, okay, here's the startup code, get OMAC up and running. So she says the code, and then OMAC starts like giving off energy and uses a huge beam of light or, heat vision, whatever, and just starts bringing an entire mountain down on the two squads underneath. So Harley takes the plane, flies out and says, all right, back to Belle Reve. Meanwhile, at Belle Reve, Waller is trying to get in contact with Deadshot. No dice. He's not answering. James Gordon Jr. enters the room and says, "Hey, Waller, that machine thinker's building is pretty much operational. Whatever he's waiting for, he's just waiting at this point. Also, pretty sure King Shark's going to eat you." And she's like, "All right, well, if that's the case, we need to go down to level 7. And Junior's like, "I thought this place only went to level 5. I've seen the blueprints." And she's like, "Why in the hell are you looking at the blueprints?" But no, there are 2 secret levels beneath that, level 6 and level 7. And he's like, "And we're just skipping over level 6. And it's like, "Oh yeah, no, there's some crazy crap in level 6. You don't even want to know about it." But no, level 7's where it's at. And she starts to explain, because he keeps asking questions. Task Force X was, of course, not the first iteration. There was a Task Force W before it, and a Task Force V before that, and U before that. And Junior's like, "I'm sorry, the X was alphabetical? You had 24 different task forces?" And she's like, "Yeah, kind of. Regardless, we're here." And they get their way into Sector 7, or Level 7, whatever it is, and start making their way in. And Waller's still wearing that, like, collar with a bomb in it. And Junior's like, "How did you manage to let him get that on you in the first place?" And she's like, "Man, you ask a lot of stupid questions." And we see 2 days ago, as everything was going down, basically Thinker just fired a gun that had the collar as the, like, ammo. It wrapped around her neck, and Thinker said, "All right, that thing is tied to my heartbeat. So if I die, you die. And if you leave, you also die. Got it?" And she's just like, "All right, whatever." So at that point, they finally make their way to the door. Turns out they were followed by King Shark. Junior says, "I'll hold them off. You get in there and do what you got to do." So Waller gets inside, and Junior uses his knife to attack King Shark for a little bit. But then he's like, "Okay, hold on. King Shark, listen up. The whole reason you're working with Thinker is because he knows where your dad is." And King Shark's like, "Yeah." It's like, "Okay, well, he doesn't. The only person who knows where your dad is Waller. So why don't you just, like, chill, let her do her thing, and then talk to her afterwards?" And he's like, "All right, well, why don't I swallow you in the meantime?" And he's like, "If you're hungry, I got plenty of people you can eat. Follow me." So we see Thinker is talking to Harley. She's bringing Omac along, and she's just doing it for the fun of it. She has no, like, dog in this race. She's just doing it to cause some mayhem. But we do see that Waller makes her way to Sector 7. She sees a big vault that's labeled Project Y, and as she opens it up, inside is something that she swore she would never go to again, something that's probably going to kill her. And she says, the thing inside is this giant King Shark looking thing named Cain. And it says, "Cain is not a forgiving god. Cain has a long memory. Cain will have your blood, Amanda Waller." The issue does not say this, but as we establish later on, this is King Shark's dad. So yeah, he's a shark god thing. It's a fine issue. I mean, it's I don't quite think that it's on the same level as what I was enjoying from Suicide Squad before this, and it had its ups and downs, but, like, in general, it was pretty good overall. I think that this is good, but it might just be getting a bit too lost in its own weeds, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to say exactly where the direction of this is going, because obviously, like, we've just added a new character to the field. He could be doing anything. But then we've also added in Power Girl. We also added in Steel, Unknown Soldiers back in the mix. Like, there's a lot of moving parts to this, and it doesn't feel like any progress has really been made. The only thing we got here is Harley betrayed the team and Omac's on his way, which, fair enough. But it does feel very slow. So whatever we get by the end of this, I'm interested, but I just am not sure if this is the right pacing for it. So all in all, I'm going to say this one's probably just a flat 7. Still good. Again, it's just better pacing. It's just, once you're done with it, yeah, great, cool. It's a fine enough story. But, like, reading it, it feels like nothing is happening. Superboy number 25, written by Justin Jordan, Scott Lobdell, and Michael Allan Nelson. Art by Ed Bennis. So, Krypton Returns Part 2, picking up after the annual from Action Comics. Superboy, Supergirl, and Superman were sent scattered through time of Krypton's history in order to basically make sure it does get destroyed. Superboy needs to talk to Supergirl and make sure she makes it off the planet. Supergirl needs to beat up a bunch of people in the Clone War, and Superman needs to talk to his dad. So first we open up with Superboy, who's already met up with Kara in her younger age, and she's just like, oh my god, what is that? And they both are looking at some monster, and it turns out the monster is the Eradicator, who apparently in this continuity is the living embodiment of entropy across the universe, and it's saying, none can escape, therefore Kara must die before she's put in that rocket. So Eradicator fires off a bolt at Kara. Superboy managed to get his TK abilities around her to protect her, but she is knocked unconscious. And then the fight begins between Superboy and Eradicator. Then we cut over to Supergirl, who's fighting against the clones. And they're just like, oh, you will kneel and die. We only respect strength here. But they say it in all this broken dialogue. And then Supergirl starts powering up her heat vision, just like, okay, I'm under a red sun, which means I don't have a lot of ability to do this, but I think this will be worth it to maybe scare him a bit. And she superheats this guy's weapon enough that it melts in his hand. And she's like, all right, didn't seem to scare him at all, so time to fight. And she starts fighting against him. And it turns out, like, yeah, her powers are fading, like, rapidly here. She's able to actually bleed pretty easily. So, as much as she's able to do, but she has to remember her training. And we get a little flashback focus of Laura, her aunt, basically saying, hey, you were raised pretty sheltered. I was raised in the military. I'm going to show you how to prepare for your trials of wearing the House of L's crest. And they go into this ice cave or whatever and are outrunning these giant troll-looking things. And she disables the fuel lines from her little scooter thing that they're flying, and Laura says, if you want to be able to fix it, all you have to do is get it from my backpack. I have extra power cords, but you have to fight me for it. And she's like, what? You said yourself I'm sheltered and you were raised in the military. How am I supposed to do that? And she's like, because you're going to need to in order to save your life. That's what's important. Here's a knife. That'll make it even. So then we go over to Superman, who is currently being held at Lance Point by Laura, saying, hey, why did you break into Jor-El's lab? And he's just like, I can't say, but I'm not here to hurt you. And she's like, you're the worst burglar of all time. Kicks Superman in the face, and he's just like, oh my god, my mom packs a punch. That's crazy. So he goes flying through some computer tech, and as he lands, his suit starts to change colors, and he regains the House of L crest onto his stomach, the big S. And Laura sees this and be like, whoa, hold on. The House of L, that's... what? Okay, hold on. Give me some of your DNA. And so he takes a scanner and like scans him a little bit and says, oh, of course, you've got radiation poisoning. That explains it. But it says yellow radiation. How the hell do you do that? All right, sit here. I'm going to go get Jor-El. He'll be here in a few minutes. And she's like, okay, well, that works out. So then we go back to the Superboy Eradicator thing. It's still just a fight going on. And Superboy is just like, oh, God, I've got to wrap this up quick. I've got to conserve my energy under this red sun. And then he's like, wait a minute, hold on. I don't do that. I don't need the yellow sun. That has nothing to do with me. I'm going to just beat him up as normal. So he touches the ground of the city, which is like completely technologically tied together, and he uses his TK ability to basically impale the Eradicator enough to stop him. And as he touches into the city, he's like, okay, I feel what's going on here. We're not done yet, because I can feel like the earthquakes and stuff are getting worse. So Kara wakes up just being like, oh, hey, you took him out. Is it over? And he's like, not quite. So then we go to Supergirl. She managed to fight off all the clones. but she's a lot worse for wear, and she's pretty much out of powers at this point. And there's somebody sneaking up behind her. Somebody's coming to get her, and she's got to deal with that. And as she looks behind her, it's hell. And he's got a shard of kryptonite in his hand, and he says, "Hey, beloved, I have a gift for you." So, yeah, that's the issue. This is what I was worried about in this, event. This is part 2. Part 1 got all the pieces where they needed to be. And then I felt like nothing was going to happen until the end. Until we got to part 4. And maybe part 2 was just a slow bit. Maybe part 3 will speed it up. But Christ, nothing happened in this issue. We got the most bare minimum of plot movement at all, barring the Superboy stuff, which makes sense. It's his book that, we should get plot progression for Superboy's plot. But even then, it felt like nothing happened. He was fighting Eradicator for 2 pages and then realized, oh, wait a minute, I have a completely different power set than all the other ones, and I can just win this immediately. And then he does. It's not even a story at that point. So maybe we'll get more elaboration on that. I don't know. I barely care. You know what's worse is that right before this issue in the Superboy trade is Superboy 24, which ends with him, not having his powers at the hand of Psycho Pirate, which clearly just doesn't matter. I can't imagine how infuriating it is to read this trade as someone who is not doing the rest of the New 52. Because it makes 0 sense. All in all, I think I'm probably just going to give this one I want to say 5, but even that sounds too generous. I'm going to go 4.5. Just barely under the mark of I like it, because I don't. It's less than okay. It's just an event for no other reason than Scott Lobdell is hopping off most of these books and he wants to have one last hurrah. That's how it honestly feels. So yeah, 4.5 for this. And I believe part 3 is in Supergirl next time. Batman number 25, written by Scott Snyder, art by Greg Capullo. This is the first part of the 0-year Dark City section. And we open in Nigeria with a bunch of soldiers in a convoy, and apparently they are just looking for something. They don't know what, but they're looking for it. And then all of a sudden they find this trap door out in the desert that they pop open, and they say, okay, everyone on your guard. We don't know what's going to be inside. We'll get payoff eventually, I guess. So we then go to Gotham. And obviously, when Secret City ended, we had the whole blackout across all of Gotham. It was a whole big thing. But now we're picking up with all of the Gotham City police are currently chasing after Batman. It's just that scene out of Batman Begins. They're all in blimps and down in the street on cars. And they think that they've got Batman trapped inside of a tunnel, because they've got men on either side. But then they see this early version of the Batmobile, and Batman's like, all right, Alfred, start up the static bond tires. And Batman presses a button, and then all of a sudden the Batmobile manages to leap up into the air and latch onto the roof of the tunnel and just fly right out over top of all the cops. And we see Commissioner Loeb. He's on all the comms, and he's basically saying, for the love of Christ, catch this guy. He's a nuisance. He's a criminal. How dare he be here? So then he calls over to Gordon, and turns out the whole reason this chase started is because they caught him at a crime scene of this guy whose bones have basically grown to the point of busting out of his body. And it's just this horribly grotesque looking crime scene. And Gordon's like, the Batman didn't cause this. He was just here. He didn't even touch anything. And Loeb's like, all right, whatever. Just find something that's going to help us bring this guy in. And Gordon's like, I'm going to focus on the fact there's a dead body. So he hangs up on Loeb. And he's working with Bullock now at this point. And basically Bullock's saying like, hey, maybe he did do it. I mean, I'm not saying that he did, but he is clearly crazy, and he was at the last crime scene of a random bone growth as well. And then Gordon points out, like, yeah, except he was just there, like, investigating. It looks like he was doing clues. And essentially, Gordon's just trying to sell him, like, look, things are bad. Things are awful. There's a superstorm and everything like that, and it's a whole big things going on. Anybody who's willing to make the world better, we should at least put a little trust in. And we see there is currently a break-in at, I guess, like a convenience store or something. And a woman is about to get beaten by the muggers when all of a sudden Batman comes in, knocks out the muggers, and then provides the woman and her child with like fresh batteries and a flashlight and all this stuff for withering out the storm. And they take a marker and color in the bat symbol on the flashlight, making a makeshift bat signal. So turns out this guy who had his bones grow out was a botanist with Wayne Enterprises. And then, of course, because it's a botanist, Pamela Isley, Poison Ivy, before she became Poison Ivy, comes in. And she's like, no, not my plants. And he's like, you know, there's a dead body up there, right? And she's like, yeah, but my plants. And he's like, all right, well, take her away. And they do some questioning on her. And she's like, yeah, a guy came in here. He had a valid pass. But the only reason that I thought he was notable is that he looked like skeletal. He was very bony. And he's like, all right, well, that seems a bit suspicious, all things considered. So we cut back down to the Batcave, and Batman's basically saying, yeah, all right, so the city's been without power. The Riddler knocked it out. They're currently working to get power back on. It should be up in like a few days, maybe before this superstorm hits, but we're not sure. However, when it comes back on, Batman's willing to guess that Riddler's just going to knock it out again. It's like a game to him. So he's got this jamming device set up that he's going to install to stop whatever Riddler's plan is when the power comes back on. So at that point, they basically are just talking about the bone samples and all that sort of stuff, trying to figure out what's going on. And Bruce traces the serum inside of the guy's bones to a Wayne Enterprises doctor from back before he got back, a Dr. Carl Helfern. And as he went investigating for this guy, he's a ghost. There's nothing about him at all. So, but apparently what they did manage to find was that he got a nickname of Dr. Death because of how often his experiments resulted in death during trials. So at that point, he's like, all right, I'm going to go investigate. And Alfred's like, maybe you should call the police and tell them what you found. And he's like, no, screw the police. Why would I do that? So as he's climbing out, he's saying this to Alfred. And then sitting at the top is Jim Gordon. He's like, yo, you saying something about the police, Bruce Wayne? And he's like, hey, Gordon, what do you want? Why are you here? And he's like, oh, well, I just wanted to say hi. It's nice to have you back in town. Also, you're doing great work here. You're taking over Wayne. And he's like, actually, I don't really want to talk to you. It was just kind of pleasantries. I'm going to go. And he's like, look, I know what happened that night, in the alley. And Bruce basically says, Lieutenant, I know everything about you, including all of the things that you covered up. You are, by definition, a crooked cop, and I do not want to talk to you. And he just goes to leave. But then he's like, all right, fine. If you don't want to be friendly, I do have one question for you as a police officer. And he says, what's going on down there? You just climbed out of a cave. That's oddly suspicious. And Alfred starts trying to make excuses, saying like, oh, it's nothing. It's just that. And Bruce is like, no, let him check it. Let him see. Go on, check it out. And Gordon leans over. He peers down the hole. And as he looks down, Bruce presses the bat sonar button in his pocket, which causes a huge thing of bats to come flying out of the hole, scratching up Gordon's face. And he's like, yeah, we were just setting up generators and stuff because, we're without power and the generators attract bats. So we were down there dealing with them. That's all. And Gordon's like, all right, well, now I need to go get a rabies shot. So thanks for that. So later on that night, Bruce goes to Gotham University, and working there is Lucius Fox, who has been laid off ever since the old days. And Bruce is like, hey, yeah, no, my dad said that you were like the most intelligent man that he has ever met. And I just wanted to know some things about your time at Wayne Enterprises. And he's like, yeah, of course, anything. And he brings up Dr. Helfer, and he's like, yeah, no, there was a team of us, a bunch of scientists, Kelver, Podgy, Brooker, Deeds, and Helfern. And it turns out that Kelver and I believe Podgy were the two people who have already had the bone itis put on them. So he's like, yeah, Helfern is really not a chill dude, and his serum basically does the exact thing that's been reported on the news. Like it's causing people to grow out bones like that. But there's one thing you need to know about the serum, Bruce. And then Lucius picks up a syringe, stabs it into Bruce's neck, and says, it's just as much my project as it is his. So Bruce collapses to the ground, and we see standing behind Lucius is Dr. Death. It's Halpern saying like, yes, no, like no one will ever find him because I'm just getting started. And then we get the wrap up on that army thing from the beginning where their entire convoy's on fire and it seems like everybody's dead from whatever they found down in that hole. I don't know what they found. I don't know if we ever get back to that, but I'm just telling you in case it's important. So I like it. I think it's heading in an interesting direction. The only problem I have with this is that Riddler knocked out the power to the whole city. And then he's not the focus. Like, we're going to this Dr. Death thing instead. That just seems weird to me. It seems oddly like a tangent off for no particular reason. But, I mean, it's the problem of I like this individual issue, but the larger implications for the story, it's weird from a story perspective that we aren't now just focusing on Riddler specifically. So, all in all, I'd say I'd probably give this one flat 7 because of that. It would probably be 7.5 or maybe even 8 if it was in more of like a direct storyline. But because it is this weird tangential piece, I don't know, I have problems with it. So yeah, I'll give this just a flat 7, but still decent story on its own. Batgirl number 25, written by Marguerite Bennett, art by Fernando Pasarin. So we interrupt the Batgirl Wanted story with a 0-year tie-in, and we see the superstorm is coming. It is about to hit, and a gas station has been completely picked over, and we get narration from Barbara saying, much like people in my generation, we see the things of like zombie apocalypse or like day after tomorrow sort of stuff, and we always come up with plans of how we would deal with it. And the answer is go to the convenience store, get the essentials, hit up the gun shop afterwards, and then hang out in whatever like Walmart, Costco, whatever you could find. That's the plan. That's always how it's got to work. We never really expected to have to use that. So we see at the convenience store at this gas station, she's got a loaf of bread and a gallon of gasoline. And she's being held at gunpoint by a man who's just basically saying, give it to me. I need what you've got now. And she's like, I paid for this, though. I didn't even loot this. This is just mine. And he's like, no, I've got daughters. Give that to me. And he fires off a shot. And Barbara goes running. And everyone's like grabbing after her. Everyone's running down the thing. But she managed to run all the blocks all the way back home. And when she gets back in, her dad and her brother are there just hanging out. They're just waiting. And Gordon's like, what's going on? Barbara, why do you seem out of breath? And she's like, things are crazy out there, and I don't think we should go out again. And he's like, fair enough. You stay here, batten down the hatches, watch after the homestead, take care of your brother. But I have a shift. I have to go, and I have to take care of this. So, I'll be back soon. Love you. Bye. And so he heads out. Barbara does all the things she needs to. She moves fragile items away from windows. She boards up all the windows. And she's like, all right, we're just going to hang out here until the storm's done. All of a sudden, there's a knock at the door. And it's the police basically saying, like, hey, you're in the flood zone. And we're going to evacuate you. So grab whatever you can carry and let's go. And she turns back to Junior, and Junior's like, Dad said to stay here, though. What are we supposed to do? And she's like, I think we need to go. Our whole house has the potential to be washed away in this flood. We've got to go with the police. So take whatever you can. And she packs up a bag for herself, and she's like, oh, all this other stuff I'm leaving. It has all these memories, but I have to tell myself it doesn't matter. And then she heads to her dad's room, and her dad is got a closet full of like police gear and stuff like that. And she's like, well, if he's not going to use it. So she gets fully tactically dressed up in like bulletproof vests and knives and stuff like that. And she takes one last look at her house, and then she heads out. And they all make their way down to a fire department, and that's where they're holding up a bunch of people here. And as we get inside, we're introduced to a man named Henry, who is basically like, hey, yeah, if you're you and your brother, if you're looking for a spot to spend, we got 2 beds right here. Go ahead and sit up. And he seems like a genuinely cool dude. So night comes. Barbara can't sleep. She's trying to read, but even Henry and Junior are pointing out, like, you haven't turned a page in like 2 hours. You're not reading at all. And she admits that she's basically just trying to ignore the fact of her home is about to be gone, and it's all just going to be washed away, and her dad has not gotten in contact, who only knows where he is right now, until at some point Junior sits up and is like, hey, Barbara, the windows are leaking. So that's a problem. And they're like, oh no, the roof could cave in if there's too much water on it. And Junior's like, no, I don't think that's what we need to be worried about, because currently there's water coming in through the doors. And then all of a sudden, a giant ass sinkhole opens up underneath the fire department, and like just water from all directions. Everything comes crushing down. So everyone's just swimming, trying to survive. Babs gets her hand on Junior and manages to grab hold of the fire pole. And Junior starts climbing up and just like, leave all the rest of them behind. They're dead weight. We're going to die if we go after them. But Babs she keeps on repeating in her head what her dad said of protect the homestead, protect your brother and all that. And she's like, the homestead could be interpreted to mean all of Gotham City, because that's like my home. So I got to protect the people here. So she goes in, she grabs some extra people from the water, gets them to cling to the pole. And we see, they all collectively come together and keep on grabbing more and more people to climb up. And as Barbara's the last one up the pole, she starts to fall, and she's grabbed by Henry, who pulls her up. And now they're all on the rooftop, with a couple people dead, I'm sure, but most of them are up on this rooftop. And it's like, okay, this building is no longer structurally sound. We need to go basically from rooftop to rooftop and get to a higher building, something that isn't going to flood, because already the floodwaters are up onto like the second story. So Henry gets a ladder off of one of the walls, and he sets it against the rooftops, and people start climbing across. And Barbara just basically looks out, and she sees that all of the blimps in the town and helicopters are all converging to this island of Gotham called Cold Light Island, and it's just completely on fire. Everything's exploding, everything's on fire, and turns out that's where Henry's from. And Barbara's like, oh no, all those people. Well, I guess they all got evacuated if Henry's here, but still, that's so many people's lives just up in fire. It's horrible that this is happening to my city. It's not only flooding, but it's also burning. This sucks. So finally they reach another building, but the ladder gives way. It breaks. Henry's the only one who manages to make it across. And he's like, okay, everyone, throw your bags over here and then jump. And then I'll catch you and we can keep on going. And once everybody throws their bags across, Henry's like, bye. I'm sure most of you just threw over your wallets and jewelry and such. I'm going to take them and I'm going to start my life somewhere else. Sorry, but, this just had to be done. So he starts walking off and everyone's yelling at him. And then Barbara's like, screw this. I'm going to be the hero. So she jumps across the building gap on her own. She lands on Henry. They start fighting. And Barbara has no training. She has no idea what she's doing, but she does manage to put up a little bit of a fight until finally she's pushed against the edge of the building. She realizes with all of her tactical gear on, and her pockets are stuffed with like mementos and memories, it's going to drown her if she falls, so she has to take it off, and as she takes it off, she manages to roll out of the way of Henry. Henry loses his footing, falls down into the water below, along with a bunch of people's bags, and looks like he dies, but then he comes up out of the water, looks up at Barbara and says, all right, bye, and then just swims away. So Barbara gets some other beams, leads the people onto the building. They're finally safe on the higher ground, but they say, like, this isn't even the storm. This is like the rain that comes before the superstorm. But regardless, we're going to get through this. We're going to survive. And that's the issue. I like it, but I think that it's kind of I scanned over the fact of Batgirl's narration, Barbara's narration. It's very repetitive. It's basically her saying, like, this is my home. I have to protect it. This is important. Like that. It's just saying the exact same boxes over and over again. And I get that it's meant to instill that this is what she's thinking about constantly. And that's the reason it's driving her actions. But from like a reading perspective, it gets really old of having these little 2 to 3 word text boxes over and over and over again saying the exact same things. Art-wise, it's fine. It's not amazing, but it's not bad. It's standard for what I expect from these comics. So all in all, I'd say this is probably just it's like a 6.5. It's not the best zero-year tie-in I've read, but it's definitely not the worst either. It's just neutral, all things considered. Nightwing number 25, written by Kyle Higgins, art by Will Conrad. So it's a zero-year tie-in, but this one doesn't happen during the superstorm, as most other ones do. This one is during the Riddler's blackout. So we open up with this weird Power Rangers-esque fight scene with a bunch of people that have swords called the Sword Walkers. And long story short, it's revealed it's just a movie that Dick Grayson is in the audience watching. And there's like a couple of kids down at the end of this row who are, laughing and being very rambunctious. And he's just like, psh, all right, these troublemakers. And then all of a sudden the power goes out across the whole city. And of course, that means the movie theater as well. And everyone's like, what? Huh? What's going on? Is this part of the movie? No, the lights like on the exit signs are out too. And someone comes in saying, hey, the whole city's dead. And someone screams out, we're being attacked, which causes just this massive panic. Everyone's running for the exits, and it looks like Dick Grayson gets trampled in all the mess, and he goes unconscious. So we go 3 hours earlier. We're doing a circus performance. Dick is up on the trapeze, and he's working with Raymond and Raya, and looks like everything's going well. Everyone's great. But then Dick decides, like, hey, I know our normal finale, but I'm really feeling it tonight. I'm going to go for it. And they're like, what? What are you talking? And then he does a quadruple spin or something like that. It's everyone cheers. It's amazing. And even the announcer is like, oh, the star of the whole circus, Dick Grayson. And we see that Raya and, I just said his name, Raymond, are both a little bit nonplussed by his show-offiness. So later on, he meets up with the two of them, says, hey, sorry about that. I was just feeling it. He's like, yeah, you feel it every night, don't you? And he's like, it was a good show. Isn't that what matters? And they're like, yeah, totally. So they're supposed to go out and see that movie, but then Raya and Raymond basically bail. It was just like, nah, we don't really want to do it tonight, so enjoy yourself or whatever. So Dick's dad then comes in and says, like, hey, aren't you going out in the movie with your friends? This is like, I don't know. I guess I'm going alone. They bailed. And he's just like, all right, first off, this is Gotham City you're in. You're not going to the movie theater alone. That's crazy talk. Secondly, maybe it's because you're being a little bit of a show-off or whatever. And he's like, whatever. Doesn't matter. I'm going anyway. And he's like, no, you're not. And trust me, you're going to want to be better to your friends, especially if you want to see a lot more movies. So then we cut over to Gotham General. Power's out, and someone was in surgery named Helsinger. I don't know if I'm supposed to know who that is, but regardless, they're about to stop the surgery because the power's out, but then all of a sudden, he gets up off the table, he's throwing stuff, he's huge, he has red skin, and he's like Solomon Grundy, but red skin. So I don't know who he is. But regardless, he starts throwing like surgeons everywhere and then busts out through the wall saying it hurts, it hurts. So we cut back to Dick in the theater, and those 3 kids who are at the end of the aisle are like, oh, hey, my name's Josh, that's CJ, that's Jaina. We thought you were like dead, but luckily you woke up. So yeah, we were waiting for you. My dad lives nearby. The other two here live across the river, so we're all just going to go back to my dad's place, and he'll take care of us there. And we find out, some of them are born and raised in Gotham, some of them are from Metropolis, but they all start making their way over to Josh's dad's place. So at the circus, they realize, oh no, Dick Grayson, he's went to the movies despite being told not to. Where could he be? How is he ever going to find his way home? We see Raya and Raymond are feeling kind of guilty that they didn't go with him, but it's really his mom that's like, oh no, he'll be right. He'll be all right. All right. Like, he's smart. He's quick. He should be fine. So we see CJ and the rest of the group are making their way down all the alleys, and they get this kind of thing where Josh's dad is apparently, like, he keeps on bringing himself like, oh, you know who my dad is. You know he's important, so we don't want to keep him waiting. And as they are walking down this alley, they come across the big red dude. I still don't have an Helsinger, as I'll just call him. So Helsinger jumps out and he says, oh, little people sneaking up on me. And he starts swiping at all the different kids, and they just go running. Dick's shirt is torn and all the hubbub. And as they make their way in, they get to this, I think, just random building. I don't think it's anything important. But they manage to close the door behind them and, like, bolt it up with a plank of wood. And everyone's like, okay, that was insane, whatever the hell that is. But there's a back entrance to this place. We can sneak out. Let's just go do that now. And we see that CJ has sprained his leg. He's not going to be able to walk, really. And Josh is like, leave him. Like, we got to get out of here before this thing finds us. He's not worth it if he's not going to be able to walk on his own. Like, let's go. And they basically say, dude, he's your friend. What are you talking about? And he's like, fine, you stay with him. I'm out. So he leaves. Dick then basically takes his ragged shirt, tears it up, and says, like, hey, guys, we're going to make it through this. We're going to be fine. We're going to be just like the Sword Walkers, that movie at the beginning. They all wore red masks, so let's do the same. So he repurposes his shirt to be a bunch of masks for these kids as they're hobbling out, and they manage to sneak by the big red guy, start making their way down an alley, but then all of a sudden they hear his pounding at the door stop, and he's found them again, and he starts chasing them down. They manage to catch up with Josh, and they're like, Josh, run, he's on our tail. But Josh trips. He's about to get beaten up. CJ and Jane are like, leave him. He's not, like, he left us, let's leave him. But Dick goes back. He distracts Helsinger for a while, enough to get him up onto the roof of a building via some fire escapes, and then Dick makes this leap across the rooftops that Helsinger isn't able to make, and he falls down onto the ground below. And so we cut to later. All the kids have shown back up at the circus, because that was also the plan when they weren't going to be able to go to Josh's house anymore. They were going to go to the circus. And we find out that Josh's dad is known gangster in Gotham, known crime boss Sal Maroni. And Sal Maroni says, hey, my boy, you saved him. Where's the head of this circus? And Haley steps up and he's like, hey, Mr. Haley, you've cared for my son. Sal Maroni owes you one, and you know how far that goes in Gotham. So they've got that going on. And then Dick, after being grounded by his parents, finds Raya and Raymond and is basically like, hey, I saw some friendships be broken tonight because of how certain people behaved. I don't want that to be what we got going on, so let's mix up the act a little bit, and this time all of us will be the stars. And he pulls out the red masks as if that's going to be something that they do. So, yeah, I think it's fine. I don't think it needs to be a 0-year tie-in. I think that's just kind of like completely unconsequential to the story being told. You could have had this be anything, but having it be a flashback works for the purpose of 0-year. The only thing that I'm going to give a little critique here on is the villain. Like, yes, okay, he's a big bad and he's doing something, but like, am I supposed to know him? Is this like Blockbuster? Because I don't think it is, because Blockbuster was introduced in Hawkman. So I don't I don't know who I'm looking at here. This is all just a random dude who's just big and brutish, and he never even got like a real name to him, which, in fairness, from the kid's perspective, he never would. But for a reader's perspective, you kind of expect it. But I digress. All in all, I'd say this is probably... I mean, it's fine. I'll say 6.5. It just doesn't feel like 7 material for me. But that may also just be because I'm kind of like on 0 year tie-ins as a whole. Nothing's really screaming that, no. This exists for a reason outside of we needed something to fill 0 year tie-ins. So yeah, 6.5 for this. Green Lantern Corps number 25, written by Jensen and Robert Venditti, art by Ivan Fernandez, Allan Jefferson, and Vic Drujiniu. So, 0 year. Because if you remember, John Stewart was a member of the Marine Corps. So, yeah. Anyway, we cut back to 20 years ago in Detroit. It seems that a bunch of auto workers are on strike, and John Stewart's mom is kind of the organizer of the whole strike. She's there shouting out like, yeah, what do we want? When do we want it? And John's sitting there as a, 7-year-old, give or take. And she's just like, why are we even, you don't even work for this company. I don't like that we don't have just normal jobs and that we have to keep on showing up here for like these things. And she's like, all right, well, let me tell you why this is important. And it's spread across the entire story, but it's very hard to tell broken up in that way, recounting it. So essentially the story is that way back when she was a child, her family basically threw this party for this one employee, this community, and they had alcohol, but they didn't have a liquor license, so therefore they got raided and they were kind of just marched out in front of a bunch of people in the community. But the people in the community were like, well, now hold on, these are just upstanding members of the community. They're not doing anything wrong. So they got into a spat with the police. It started escalating and the police fled. But then it started escalating from there into like full-scale riots and looting and stuff. So more police were brought in as well as actual military. They started enacting things like curfews and whatnot. And the mother was actually happy to see that the criminals, the rioters and whatnot, were being taken away because she thought that was fair. However, she also saw a lot of police brutality, and one time when she was heading home, her and her family were actually detained outside their house until curfew passed, so that way she would be able to be punished for that. And mind you, this is all primarily families of like color and stuff like that. So then one day, a man who was a soldier, who was brought in along with the rest of the National Guard here, then also lived in this area. He stood up for them. He talked the police down, and they showed how important it was that rules are not meant to be blindly followed. It's about what's right that you need to analyze that, because people in power are still fallible. So all that's told over the course of the whole issue. It integrates, but like I can't stop to pause and say that each time. So anyway, Superstorm's coming into Gotham, and we see there's an evacuation notice. There's a bunch of people inside the Gotham Stadium, and the Marines are being sent in to basically gather as many people they can here and bring them out to get them all out. And already the Marines are like, this town is a rat's nest. It does not deserve to be saved. Can we just leave? But John's like, excuse me, this is your country. You better treat it as such. So they make their way down the hallways of the stadium, and they're expecting a few hundred people, but then when they get to the core, they see that apparently it's thousands of people are here. The art does not reflect that, but they say it does. And so as they get in, they start calling out the orders and saying like, all right, everyone, you need to evacuate. Let's go. We got boats waiting. Let's form an orderly line. And then this man in a mask with an Anarchy symbol on his chest, named Anarchy, who is an established DC character, comes out and basically says, excuse me, you cannot tell us what to do. We have reclaimed this stadium, and we do not abide by whatever rules you think you can just throw in here. And they're like, bro, We're here to help. We're here to fix that. I don't know what you think is going on here, but we're here as an evacuation mission. So get your ass to the door. And then all of a sudden, Anarchy tases the leader of the Marine unit, and an all-out fight breaks out where the Marines are basically surprised, and all the people around start attacking them. Not all of them, but a decent amount have, bats and stuff to attack with. So the Marines are handcuffed, they have their guns taken away, and they're brought into a cage in the middle of the stadium, and they're put in there. And Anarchy basically throws out being like, see, this whole stadium was built on your old homes. Like, it was built as you have to pay to come here. That's not, like, this was your land. It was taken away. This should belong to you. And now it does again. And we're not going to let anybody ever take us away from this again. And so Anarchy is basically saying, yeah, no, this is a state of anarchy now. So at that point, John's looking over his troop, and they're all just like, okay, what do we do? The head is still out. The guy in charge is still out. So John's like, I remember seeing a Super Bowl halftime show here when all of a sudden the lead act just appeared out of the ground, seemingly from nowhere. And he taps his foot around a little bit and finds a trapdoor. So he has some of the other people in the cage provide cover as they start making their way down into the tunnels beneath. But they are caught out. They are seen, and Anarchy's men are about to fire on them, but Anarchy stops them. Says it doesn't matter, they can't get their way out there anyway. So they go through the tunnels, and they find that the doors are all chained up, and it doesn't seem like there's any way out. And then all the lights go out, and Anarchy and his men are down in the tunnels, and they start beating up the Marines again. But then John takes notice of the surroundings. He pulls a pipe off the wall, which then provides some superheated steam all over Anarchy's men. But they do have a couple of the Marines still in their grasp. So at that point, John and the men make their way to just kind of a maintenance room where they get some tools that they can turn into makeshift weapons. And they say, all right, we're going to go up there. We're going to overwhelm them. We're going to take back what we need. But first we need to get our guns back. So find where those are, and that's our first goal. So they bust out through some doors. They find the men who took their guns, and they start fighting them to get them back. And as one of them is down on the ground, the leader of the troop is basically like, all right, we had explosives with us. We don't see those now. Where are they? Guy's not talking. And the lieutenant is just like throwing punches to the point where he's about to kill him. And John intervenes and says like, hey, no, we can't go to that level. We can't kill them. He's still a citizen. And one of the people chimes up saying like, hey, they stole our guns and threatened to kill us. That's authorizes lethal force. And John's like, yeah, it doesn't mean we have to use it though. So at that point, they start making their way out towards like the central area. Anarchy has the captured Marines tied up with guns to their heads, and it's basically coming to a powder keg. And the Marines are being ordered, shoot them, take them all out, whatever it takes to get our men back. John realizes this isn't going to solve anything, and we shouldn't be doing this. So he pulls a few flashbangs, throws them out into the center, and it causes enough distraction that he's able to get over to Anarchy and knock him out. And he picks up Anarchy's megaphone and says, everyone, we're not here to take you against your will. If you would like to be evacuated, you can do so now. If you're being held here against your will, or you need help moving, raise your hand and we will come to assist you. Otherwise, you're welcome to stay here. We're not about to kick you out, okay? And so, one by one, a bunch of people all chime up and they realize, like, yeah, no, I kind of want to go. This seems like it got out of hand a little quickly here. So, they all start making their way out. They bring out Anarchy in cuffs, but as they go to remove his mask, he has his own little flashbang. He takes off his hoodie and he manages to disappear into the crowd. And at this point, John's like, okay, forget that. Just focus on the people, get them all back. And the lieutenant comes up being like, excuse me, Stewart, this is not your troop. You are not in command here. And you went against the direct order I gave you. You will be court-martialed for that. And he's like, oh yeah, try it. Because then I'll tell them how you were willing to kill American citizens for like no reason at all. And the guy goes to throw a punch and John just takes him out, throws him upside down. And he's like, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm out. And he takes off his jacket and he tells his people, like, yeah, get the buses moving, get them all out. And he starts walking through the streets of Gotham and he's talking to himself like, maybe I made a mistake, but I can't be part of the Corps anymore. it's not that's what it comes to, is that I have to go against my conscience. It's not worth it. And we see Batman is standing on a rooftop nearby listening to what he's saying, and he's like, oh, all right, guess this was taken care of. And he just disappears as John goes to look at him. So finally, the last thing is little John Stewart was listening to his mother's story the whole time about her parents and blah blah blah, and he's like, oh my god, that's awful. So what happened? Did the ride stop? And he's like, yeah, the ride stopped, but like, not everything got better immediately. There was a lot of racism. Like, there still is a lot of racism. That's the kind of thing that we're trying to deal with. Power is not good on its own. You need to be a good person with power. So she hands John the megaphone and says, look, take this, keep their spirits up. That's all that we're trying to do here. Just make them understand that they can get something more out of this than being treated unfairly. And yeah, that's the issue. I really like this one. I think that I did it a disservice in how I delivered the story, but it was really hard to recount it on the way the story actually told it. But it does a great job of balancing these two things and showing how different elements of the story impacts what John is doing at the given time where he's remembering it. So yeah, it's solid. It has nothing to do with Batman or Zero Year. Like, there is no reason for this to happen except that Anarchy is traditionally a Batman villain. But even beyond that, like, this could have been sent at any time just as a flashback, and it would have still been a great story. So overall, I think this is probably, honestly, I'll give this one like an 8. I think this one, it has something to say. It says it well. It's a great just little one and done issue if you're interested in not even just John Stewart's backstory, but just a solid story overall. So yeah, I'll give it an 8. I really did like it. Superman Wonder Woman #2, written by Charles Soule, art by Tony S. Daniel. So last issue, Wonder Woman and Superman went to go take care of a boat, and Doomsday was on it, and Wonder Woman got hit hard. And we open with her continuing to get hit hard, and as she's fighting up against it, she's like, all right, you know how to fight beasts. You've done it before. You just got to get up and find its weak point. And as she's thinking, her narration is literally interrupted by Doomsday punching her in the face and breaking her arm. And as she is trying to think her way out of this, she's like, I just got to fly away. That's like my only option right now. We see this giant wave is about to overtake the boat, and Doomsday starts to vanish in a flash of light as Superman lifts the boat up out of the water and manages to save everyone on board. And later on, as he's got the boat to shore, he's basically asking, hey, you all right? What happened there? What did you get hit by? And she's like, I don't know. It was huge. It was like 3 meters tall and had these bony protrusions all over it. It's crazy. And Clark was like, I'm sorry, did you say bony protrusions? Did you? Okay, you need to come with me right now. And so they immediately rush back to the Fortress of Solitude, and Clark pulls open the Phantom Zone projector, and he's like, hey, all right, this is like Supermax prison for Kryptonians, and inside, where is he? There he is. Is this the thing you saw? And they zoom in on Doomsday, and he's like, yep, that's it. What is it? And he's like, all right, that's Doomsday. It is death incarnate. It is literally just the end of all things, and he is totally unable to be beaten. That's why he's in the Phantom Zone. And one of them was like, I mean, he's just a monster. Like, what's so bad about him? I was like, you have no idea. Like, I don't think I could handle him if Doomsday got out of the Phantom Zone. And you're telling me that he was actually there in the real world? He was up on, like, we're screwed, man. And one of them was like, hey, don't worry. Like, you're Superman. You will have the strength to beat him, not because you're Kryptonian, but because you're Superman. And also, you're not going to be alone. So at that point, Wonder Woman takes Superman to below Mount Etna, where Hephaestus lives. And Hephaestus is like, hey, welcome to the armory. Wonder Woman, what can I get you? Like, what kind of weapon are you looking for? And she's like, oh, it's not for me, it's for him. And she's like, okay, why would I make something for someone who's not even a part of my continuity? And she's just like, because he's a friend and he needs it. And he's he's strong. He's not like ordinary men. And he's like, all right, we'll see about that. And Hephaestus goes and like eyes him down and then takes his hammer, is about to strike Clark with it. And Clark just grabs it with no problem at all. And he's just like, all right, fair enough. What do you want me to build? So Wonder Woman says, we just need this to be this strong, like, it's a suit of armor for war, and it needs to be the strongest thing that you have ever made, because the things we're fighting are the strongest we'll ever fight. And he starts making it, and Superman's like, hey, thanks for the help. And he's like, I ain't doing it for you, I'm doing it for her. So at that point, Apollo and Strife show up. And if you're not reading Brian Azzarello's Wonder Woman, they're just other gods who don't particularly like Wonder Woman. And he steps up and he's like, oh, hey, Wonder Woman, I see you brought your boyfriend along. And Superman's like, you told him about us? And it's just like, no, they're gods. They just know stuff like that. It's very inconvenient. And Apollo basically is like, all right, look, I get it. Wonder Woman, you want to slum it every once in a while, but this is embarrassing. I mean, he's not even human. Gross. And he just basically keeps talking down Superman the whole time. And Superman's like, excuse me, hey, real quick, just want to make this clear. She said you're a god. You are a god, right? And he's like, yeah, I'm the personification of the sun itself. What you gonna do about that? And he's like, oh, nothing. But like, if you talk to Diana like that again, I'm not gonna hold back because I think you can take it. And he's like, oh, is that the case? And so he just backhands Superman. Superman goes flying into Hephaestus's iron melting pot or whatever. And then we take a break and we go to Cat Grant, who's trying to get in contact with Clark, and Clark's not answering. And that's it. That's the whole break. Anyway, back to Superman. Wonder Woman goes to try to fish Superman out of the iron thing, and Strife is like, it's always a bummer when you see your boyfriend lose a fight. Like, you can never just ignore that. It's always going to be sitting there in the back of your head over and over again. And Wonder Woman goes to attack Apollo, but then Superman gets up and he's like, no, allow me. And so he comes flying out, he punches Apollo, and Apollo falls back, not nearly as far. And he's like, you dare lay a hand, I am the sun. And he blasts Superman with his like powers, and Superman just stands there and he's like, did you just blast me with sunlight? You're not too bright, are you? And now that he's supercharged, like he's talking, he's filled with adrenaline, he grabs Apollo by his shirt collar and just throws him up through the roof of the mountain, like no problem at all, as he goes flying up into the sky. And Superman turns to Diana and he's like, before you say anything, I know that you could handle that, but I really wanted to do it myself. And Strife is like, oh my God, you're perfect. So at that point, Superman turns to Hephaestus, says, thank you again for your offer of help, but I think we're going to pass. I don't really want to deal with his family anymore, so bye. And they all take off. Then we cut over to Sahara Desert. And as this convoy of camels go by, we see that all of a sudden they are attacked by this spiky ball thing that starts chopping off heads and limbs and just crazy murdering spree until all of them are dead. And the ball opens up, and inside of it is General Zod. Okay. I mean, yeah, he was in the Phantom Zone. It makes sense if Doomsday is able to come through. Zod should be as well. So we'll see where that ends up. All in all, I like it. I think it's strangely heartfelt in the way that's hard to like explain. Like, yes, they're in a relationship and they have these little talks back and forth every once in a while that like makes it clear that they're in a relationship, but it's more so the moments where like Diana reacts when Superman is just even punched. Like, clearly he's fine, he'll be okay, but like she still reacts like that. I don't know. It's this book is doing more to sell the relationship between them for me than anything I've seen in any other book thus far. Like Justice League, nah, it doesn't even matter, because that's all been about like, oh, and we have to hide it and keep it secret and no one can know because we're just so powerful. This one's like, nah, man, I got a crazy family and I don't want you to meet them. That's perfectly fine for a relationship thing. So I'm into it. I'm going to say this is I'm going to give it an 8, honestly. And I think I was thinking 7.5, but honestly, Tony S. Daniels' art just pushes it over that extra bit. And then add on top of it the imagery of Apollo just blasting through like the peak of a mountain. It's just tiny little moments like that I love. So yeah, 8 for this. Really enjoying it. Justice League of America's Vibe, number 9, written by Sterling Gates, art by Derlis Santacruz. So last issue, we had Breacher revealing, hey, I'm the father of Gypsy, my wife is the evil dictator person, and also we're here in my home dimension, and we have to save the Earth. So we open up in that home dimension of Pyridel in the past when they say, hey, this place is basically a multi-dimensional point of trade. Like, everyone comes here because it's so peaceful and beautiful, and everyone just trades stuff. Even the gods themselves show up here. But not anymore. And we see it's completely overrun with, like, evil robot stuff. And we see two kids are running down the street trying to find Breacher. And a couple of robots come out of the walls, more or less. They call them raptors. And the one older brother, like, shoves the sister away, saying, go, I'll hold them off. He's held down by this raptor. And then we see a gunshot take out the one going after the girl. And as the raptors try to assimilate the young boy, they are also knocked out with some sonic waves. So at that point, the boy sits up and is just like, oh, where's my sister? Who are you guys? And Vibe's the one who speaks up saying, hey, we're the Justice League. Kinda. I mean, sorry, not real. We are a collection of people who model ourselves off the Justice League, and we're here to save the world. So at that point, we see that one of the people in the group, I'm not going to be good with their names because it really doesn't come up that much, but Nilo, no, not Nilo. What's her name? Vic. Vic is a raptor. It's a lady who's about to be transformed, but it got stopped midway and she's still in control. So the kid like freaks out because it's like, oh no, it's another one of them. And he's like, no, I'm one of the good guys. So anyway, at this point, Vibe, he starts having his little chest contraction things again. His multiversal energy's going nuts. And they open up his little Tony Stark thing on his chest and they talk to the boy saying, boy, did you get the thing that we requested you get? And it turns out his grandfather is a multiversal artisan where he's able to take multiversal energy and condense it into a sphere. And so this is the very last one. They put it inside of his little arc reactor, close it up, and it's going to basically keep his powers in check. He's going to basically also be supercharged by this as well. So they put it in, everything's good to go, and the group then says, all right, more of them are arriving. We got to go and get back to our like central base of commands. And we see the little girl's eyes glow menacingly. So then we cut back to the real world where Dante is in a hospital bed. And Agent Gunn comes up and is checking on him. And as Gunn's about to leave because it looks like he's still comatose, Dante sits up being like, all right, where's my brother? And he's just like, look, we're looking for him. He's like, you lost my brother? And he's like, don't get all, like, I lost so much because I covered for your ass inside there. Yeah, your brother was taken, like, to a different universe probably, and we're doing what we can. But, like, don't get on me saying I'm not doing anything because you're stupid. And at that point, he goes and he walks out saying, all right, whatever, just be glad nobody's looking for you right now, because otherwise Waller would have it out for you. And Waller calls up Gunn saying like, hey, where are you? And he's like, I'm just finishing up some old business. I'll be right back in. So back in Pyridel, we see Rupture, a.k.a. Armando, is looking out over the city being like, I kind of remember that guy who said he was my brother. And like, that's a memory I have. And then we see Mordeth, the wife and mother of Gypsy, comes out being like, no, that's a fake memory. You don't actually think that. And she's like, I'm pretty sure I do. He's like, no, let me take that away from you. And she zaps his brain. And then she's like, there, do you remember it now? And he's like, remember what? And he's like, all right, perfect. Yep. Anyway, I've been siphoning energy out of my daughter, but I've also been spying on my husband who's building an army. So I'm going to send you to go take him out, including all of his companions. That includes that pesky little Vibe character. But first, let's go check on my daughter. And she makes her way down into a deep lab. And we see Gypsy's strung up with a whole bunch of machine parts or something like that. And apparently the end result here is she has so much Earth energy in her, some like Earth Zero energy, that it's going to be enough that once it's siphoned that she can break through the block to the Earth Zero universe that the husband set up, which will then allow her to take over the entirety of the multiverse, because it's kind of like the center of everything. So, yeah, that's important there. So then we go back to Breacher's little, like, camp where he's got all of his stuff, and they're going over the plans one more time of, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to break into her place. We're going to find this stuff, and then we're going to kill Mordeth and liberate everybody who's lives in Pyradel. And Vibe's like, also, we're going to save my brother and Gypsy, right? And they kind of look at each other, and she's like, guys, come on. That's the whole reason I'm here. We got to save my brother and Gypsy. And Breacher then comes in being like, look, we'll try to save Gypsy, like, and if we can, your brother. But your brother has been mind whammied, like, a lot. He might not even be in there anymore. And he's like, no, my brother's in there. Because, turns out, his high school football nickname was Rupture, because he was able to rupture the enemy's defenses. So why would he take that name if he were not in there still? And they all say, that's pretty weak, man, but okay, do what you gotta do. And at that point, all of a sudden, he starts feeling like, oh, hold on, I'm getting my vibe senses tingling. And then all of a sudden, everything starts like blowing up a little bit. And as they look out into the city nearby, they see this multiversal energy exploding out, rifts in the space-time continuum and whatnot. And Breacher's like, ah, crap, they got the energy from my daughter. All right, we're out of time. We gotta take care of this now. And the little girl speaks up and is just like, I've been spying on you the whole time. I know your plans. You can't possibly do anything to stop me. Tee-hee. So Rupture shows up and starts like attacking everybody. Breacher is like, all right, everybody, the plans that we didn't talk about, here's their code numbers. Everyone do what you gotta do. And at that point, the one little smart kid guy, Nilo, he turns to Vibe and he's like, well, kid, it's been nice knowing you. He's like, what? So Breacher then grabs hold of Vibe. They vanish into some, the bleed between spaces. And Breacher reveals, okay, we weren't going to do this plan, but now we have to do this plan where I'm going to take the little multiverse spear thing out of your body, which is going to then turn you into a multiversal bomb, and it will destroy like the entirety of Pyradel, more or less, or it's going to destroy the ability for her to travel between places or whatnot. But it will save all of life, because if Mordeth's able to get to Earth Zero, everybody's dead. So, see ya, kid. And he leaves Breacher to die, or he leaves Vibe to die in the bleed. And then in the real world, we see Amanda Waller has found Dante. Oops. So yeah, it's a good, next issue is the last issue. It's a good penultimate issue. It's setting up big stakes at the end here. I can see a lot of different ways this could go. My only real criticism here is that it feels so rushed. Like, just last issue, we got like the reintroduction to Breacher. We got his like backstory and said like, here's who I am. Here's this important stuff about me. And now we're already going into the, no, but I am actually working against you. Like, maybe he's still doing the heroic thing, but he's willing to betray Vibe. I don't feel like it's given the proper circumstance, the pomp and circumstance to get me to believe like, oh, how could you betray him like this? Like, I don't know him. He's just shown up, and now I'm like, oh no, he's betrayed us, I guess? It just doesn't feel like we've spent enough time here, and that's entirely on the realm of this book got canceled. It just wasn't given a proper enough time to get to this point, but I still enjoy the concepts. That's still okay. It's just, I don't know. It's just a little bit rushed for me. So overall, I'm going to give this one probably just a flat 7. Still enjoying the book. I don't want to make it sound like I'm not, but it is very rushed here at the end. So we'll see what kind of finale we can really get out of it with only one more issue left. Katana number 9, written by Ann Nocenti, art by ChrisCross and Cliff Richards. So last issue, a lot of stuff happened, but the big thing is Katana was told that she needs to kill Mona Shard, who is a ghost from her sword, who is possibly going to be with the Dagger Clan. This issue opens with a full-page spread of a super close-up of Shun's decapitated foot. And they're just basically saying like, yes, it has a tattoo that says the prophecy that the Daggers clan will take over the world, but they're all drinkers and gamblers and they're not like that smart. But I'm here on their boat, says Katana, and I'm going to attack Mona Shard wherever she may be. So we see Mona is up top and she is in the body of this young girl and is using it to kill the head of the Dagger clan and basically take his place and say, hey, I'm now your leader. Listen to whatever I have to say. And the little girl's soul inside of the body is also fighting to get out. So the Dagger clan says, hey, we typically use some like skulls and bones and stuff to contain spirits. And she's like, well, dress me up. Let's do it. So Katana finally gets topside on the boat and says, hey, I'm looking for Mona Shard. And Daggers are like, we don't know what you're talking about. And then the little girl's like, help me, they're going to attack me. And she's like, attacking a child, you Daggers are so horrible. So they start to fight, but then it's revealed the little girl is, of course, not the little girl, gets a drop attack on Katana saying, haha, I am Mona Shard. And my dagger is made of a shard from your sword back when it broke. Remember that? And Katana's like, okay, well, this was too much for me, and you're in a little girl's body, and I'm not about to kill a little girl, so I'm out. And she just dives over the edge of the boat. And Katana then, like, starts making her way towards the coast, being like, I know it was my task to kill Mona Shard, but if she is a little girl, I cannot do that. And then she, like, passes out in the riverbed. So when she comes to, apparently Sickle has brought her home, changed her clothes, patched up her wounds, and put her to bed. And they basically are saying, like, you don't understand. Like, the reason that I do this is all these, like, it doesn't matter. It's just pretense for them to sleep together. So they get in bed. Tatsu has a dream about, which men should I go with? And she's talking to Swagger and who's the other guy? Junko are both in the dream, and she's getting her like nails done at the same time. And she's like, my husband is boring, but also he doesn't exist because he's a ghost. And then Sickle is a bad boy, and I like that. And nothing is accomplished in this dream. So anyway, she wakes up. She sees Sickle still asleep. She starts peeking around the room. She finds a Falcon's like eye guards and an address written down on a desk in plain view. And she's like, well, that's super obviously meant for me, but regardless. And then she hears Sickle waking up and she jumps back in bed and says, hey, I wasn't looking around. So later that night, she goes to the address that was listed with this Falcon's address, and she says, okay, Sickle says the Sword Clan's on the up and up and is running all the business above the board. But this address I look down in, there's an illegal gambling den, and at the head of it is Coil. And how dare he? He's besmirching the Sword Clan. So she jumps in and says, I've caught you, Coil. And Coil says, everyone, kill her. She's seen too much. So because of where this is taking place, they just start throwing toys at her because they're in like a warehouse of toys. And it doesn't do anything, shockingly enough. But then as she manages to scare them off with like some of her own like swords and stuff, we then see that I think it's Shun. Yeah, it's definitely Shun. Has found like an illegal firearm place that she is getting a gun at. And then she has made her way to the place. She followed Katana more or less, made her way to the same place and says, there's Coil. I'ma shoot him in the head. She pulls the trigger. One of his goons pushes him out of the way and like blows his brains out. And then she's like, oh, now I have an even better idea. Rather than kill them, I'm going to maim them like they maimed me. And that's it for her. That's all we're doing with her. So then we cut over to last issue. A sumo wrestler got possessed by one of the ghosts. We see that the sumo wrestler is just eating a lot. And then he's like, boy, it sure is hard possessing the sumo wrestler's body because all I want to do is eat and sleep. And then there's a mouse that's like trying to eat his rice and he catches it in a bowl. And then we're done with that. So then we go back to the Katana fight. And we see on one of the shelves that Katana is fighting in front of, super obviously, Mona is just standing there, like posing like she's a toy. And then she launches out his katana and says, "Aha, the Dagger Clan is here as well. Daggers, kill her." So then Katana says, "Sword Clan. Regardless of whether or not you're doing illegal things that besmirch the Sword Clan's name, fight against the Dagger Clan. Come on, all of us together." And then we see Mona's like inner child is trying to burst its way out again. So either way, the swords fight against the daggers. It goes on for a little bit. And then it comes down to Katana versus Mona. And Mona's like, "I know you're not going to kill this small child's body." Also, she tries doing the posing as a toy thing again. And Katana calls her out of like, "That worked one time. It won't work again." And I'm like, "It shouldn't have worked one time, Katana." But regardless, he says, "I know that you're not going to kill this little girl's body. So you don't have it in you. You have morals. You have codes. I don't have anything like that. So have at ye." And she leaps down to Katana, and it ends on a cliffhanger of, is Katana really going to run a sword through this innocent little girl? Couldn't care less. Yeah, it's I'll be honest, at least this issue felt focused for the most part. Yes, we cut to that weird ass Shun subplot and then that sumo wrestler thing, but like, even then, I don't feel like I understand. Like, the whole point of this is Tatsu needs to join the Sword Clan, and in order to take the rightful place at the head, she needs to kill Mona. But, like, none of that is brought up. And she's already leading the Sword Clan from a perspective of she's giving them commands and they're following orders. So, like, what are we doing? I'm lost with whatever the aim of this book has been. And then we brought back that falcon headdress thing, considering you had a character that was based around falcons, like, and he doesn't even show up. Maybe he's supposed to be Sickle. I don't know. I'm lost entirely. I don't understand what the aim of this is anymore. So I'm going to say this is like a 4. And that's only because I managed to get the bare essentials of what was happening in each page. Sometimes that's not as easy as it sounds. So yeah, this is a 4. And I begrudgingly say I look forward to the next issue, if only because it is the final issue. World's Finest number 17, written by Paul Levitz, art by R.B. Silva and Scott McDaniel. So, past few issues, Power Girl's powers have been on the fritz, and then last issue we got introduced to a villain whose whole thing is burning down fashion shows, and she also has shadow powers. So we open up in a tattoo parlor where Power Girl is trying to get a tattoo because she's like, hey, if I'm vulnerable, may as well give it a shot. But as the tattoo artist goes to put the needle to her skin, it just snaps. And Helen is there like, yeah, this is to be expected. You're not going to get a tattoo. And the guy's like, I don't understand how this happened. I'll get another needle. And Power Girl's like, don't worry about it. We're going to go leave now anyway. And we see that Helena actually has her own tattoo of a cat and a bat because, of course. And so they leave the tattoo parlor and they basically say, okay, do you know what's going on with your powers, Power Girl? And she's just like, I mean, sometimes I'm able to bleed. Sometimes I'm completely invulnerable. I don't know. Something's weird, but I think I'm going to go sunbathing to fix it. And we see that she has basically chartered one of those like billionaire go up into space rides. So she goes up, she's in the suit and all that, and she gets up and they say, all right, well, you can take a look around. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And she's like, I mean, I don't think that's true for me. And she looks like she's about to put on her helmet, but then she starts taking off her spacesuit. And the astronaut that's there, like piloting the place, is like, I don't know if you think we're going to join the 22 Mile High Club, but that's not going to happen. And she's like, oh, you wish that's what we were doing. But no, she gets into her Power Girl outfit and she's like, when you get back down to Earth, you're going to be finding a big bonus and an NDA to sign so that you'll never speak of this again, but I just need to go on a little spacewalk. So she gets out of the spaceship, is fully hit by the sun's rays, and she's like, yeah, this feels good. So back down on Earth, Huntress is looking through some subway footage to find the woman that was setting fire to the fashion shows and specifically get a picture of her tattoos, which she then shops around to a bunch of different tattoo shops around the city, but nothing's coming up. She's not able to find anything. So instead she's like, okay, well, I think that there is no sort of like fashion show or anything going on, but there is a party where a bunch of fashion people would be going to. So that might be where she hits next. And then like immediately the building goes up in flames. She's like, all right, well, time to go find her. So she jumps down. She goes into the flames. She's like, all right, there's no way exit here. There's no exit there. It's got to be over here. And she starts chasing her down this bridge where the woman is just on a bike, just a normal ass bicycle. And she's just like, dum-da-dum. And Huntress goes in, starts attacking her. And again, I don't have a name for her. She never gives her name. But regardless, this tattoo lady is like, oh, are you just everywhere in this city? And she's like, I'm everywhere you're gonna be. So give yourself up, you crazy shadow lady. So they start fighting for a minute. We see Karen up in space getting hit with solar energy. She's like, okay, this is starting to sting a little bit, actually. I might have too much energy. And so she starts plummeting down to Earth. And she's like, all right, I have to aim. I gotta be at least close to where Helena is. That's very important. So she's using her supervision to see down to Earth. Meanwhile, the shadow woman is leaping off of bridges. She uses her shadow magic to not only attack some nearby people, but also cushion her landing. Some cops see what's happening. They get out of the car and start to attack. And he's just like, oh, you think you can defend this city that defends false beauty? I know what real beauty is. And she uses her shadow magic to attack the cops. And as she has one of the cops down at I want to say knife point, but it's all shadows, so shadow point. Helena uses her arrows to break the shadow, and she's like, oh, you got some real image issues. So at that point, they're about to start arguing again, and then they look up in the sky and see this fireball just descending towards them. And immediately Helena's like, oh God, it's Karen. What in the hell's going on? So Karen lands in the bay nearby. Helena's like, all right, she's more important than just finding the shadow lady. I gotta go help her. So she dives into the water and goes over to where the water's bubbling up with heat. And as she makes her way closer, Karen pops up and says, stay back. I'm out of control. And it seems that she's glowing and has too much excess energy. So whatever's going to happen with that. I really want a name for this villain. I don't understand why we've gone so long here where it's just like, ah, yes, random lady who's never even bothered to say her name. And it looks like the decided name here at the end is the Tattooed Lady, because I'm just looking ahead in the next issue real quick, but just say that. At any given point, just say and we're calling her the Tattooed Lady now. It can just be a colloquial thing. You don't have to make it a thing where it's she announces herself as, I am the Tattooed Lady. So yeah, I don't know. It's frustrating to me just because recounting it is very difficult. Beyond that, it's kind of what I expect from this series so far. Everything feels very episodic while not actually doing much with the plot. Okay, her powers are on the fritz, and we've been doing that for 3 issues. But now her powers are on the fritz in the opposite way, where, oh no, she can't control her powers and she's too strong. Okay, yeah, do what you got to do here. Overall, this is probably I want to say a 5.5. It doesn't make me excited to read this book, and it hasn't for any period of time, but I'm not dreading it either. It's such a fast read. It's so fast paced that I'm done reading it in 3 minutes. It's a nothing book, and I'll put it slightly above the average of 5 because it's not doing anything I dislike. That I know that doesn't make much sense, and that a dislike would bring it to an average, but it's just so mediocre, but it's still at least doing things that are entertaining. So yeah, 5.5 with all that rambling. Constantine number 8, written by Ray Fawkes, art by ACO. So last issue, Constantine was kind of romantically involved with Sargon, and then all of a sudden, Mr. E showed up and stabbed him in the back. So we pick up with a chess match where Constantine is just playing against some old guy, and the guy's basically saying hey, during a chess game, when you are a little bit stressed out, a good opponent will always like get in your head. He'll like insult you and get you to get a bit flustered. When that happens, you just gotta play out your hand, play it cool, and wait for an opening, and then do something unexpected. So at that point, we cut back, and the blade that Mr. E is using while Sargon's just sitting back watching is apparently like a soul removing blade or something like that. So John's soul comes out of his body, and he's able to fight in this form. And he says, Mr. E did not expect that. That is not something that's easy to do, and it takes all of his concentration, but he's able to do it. And he fights against Mr. E's soul enough to get Mr. E's body off of him, and he's able to pull the blade from his own back and throw it out the window. So Mr. E is like, all right, well, I will admit I am impressed. You have always been a worthy opponent. And John's like, all right, whatever, shut up and let's fight. So at that point, Mr. E is like eyeing him down. He's seeing what's going on. He's able to see this like energy coming off of John as John gets all prepped up. And Sargon's like, hey, I can't really get involved because of the laws of our cult says that we can't, but you might want to punch him soon because he's looking for all of your weaknesses right now. And he still just continues. He doesn't trust Sargon, so he's not making a move. But then Mr. E launches an attack with a bunch of like clone Mr. E's, magical clones or something. But Constantine sees behind Mr. E is what he calls the Moonblade. It's this sword. And he's like, wait a minute, hold on. Sargon set that up. It's just sitting over there. She expected me to see that and wants me to use against Mr. E. All right, fair enough. She might not be able to fight him directly, but she can help me out via this kind of thing. So he sets up this kind of magical distraction via his cigarette. It manages to dispel all of the other Mr. E bodies. And then, except for one, I guess. I don't know. Hard to tell what's going on, honestly. But Constantine manages to grab hold of the mystery body and throw him off of this cliff behind the window. And as Constantine hits the ground, Mr. E just gets his other body up inside the room and just be like, well, he's down there. He's not dead yet. So, and then all of a sudden you hear Constantine's voice behind Mr. E. He turns around. He sees Constantine has the Moonblade, and he is able to shove it inside of Mr. E's body, which then basically, once again, like separates his soul out. It is getting completely absorbed into the Moonblade. So at that point, with Mr. E dead, Tanarak, who's watching all this via crystal ball, and Sargon absorb the magical energy that Mr. E had, because remember, they had basically all the magic in the world split between the three of them. Now it's just the two of them. So the two of them absorb this energy together, and Sargon's like, oh my god, I am one step away from godhood. This is incredible. You have no idea how good this feels. And Constantine's like, yeah, really don't. Anyway, I'm keeping this blade. So at that point, Sargon comes down and says, hey, look, here's the thing. This could be yours too. Like, we don't have to do this like fake working together thing. We can do this actual working together. Be with us. Help us out here. Just, make this world your own playground. And Constantine says, all right, you win. Sign me up. And he kisses Sargon and says, like, yeah, of course this is all a ruse. Like, of course I'm not actually on her side, but I got to play along for now. So at that point, once Sargon leaves, she goes on her own way. John takes the Moonblade, spits some alcohol on it, and turns out that, as was said before, Mr. E's soul is actually still alive, completely depowered, but all trapped within this blade. And he's just like, oh, I expect you to, you want me to beg, you want me to try to please you to get out of there? He's like, no, you're part of the Cult of the Cold Flame. You're going to tell me everything I need to know about the Cult of the Cold Flame in order to take them down. If you don't, I'm going to send this sword into another dimension, and you're never going to see anybody for the next 5,000 years. So you're going to help me one way or another here. And Mr. Reed basically has nothing to say to that, and he's like, good, so let's get started. So some time passes. Constantine then goes, looks out the window, and he essentially gets a magical pop-up notification where we see the events that ended Trinity War and went into Forever Evil. Like, right before Constantine showed up in that battle, we see, what's his name? Shazam picking up Pandora's box, and he's like, geez, I told Shazam not to touch that thing. Oh, well, guess I got to go get involved now. And it says, to be continued retroactively in Forever Evil, or Trinity War. And then we're picking up in Forever Evil. So, yeah. Finally glad we got the timeline resolution on that, because I was very confused as how this was happening, as well as the whole thing going on in that. So, I believe we've already started the Blight storyline, or at least we're very close to starting that over in Justice League Dark. So that's happening there. We'll be continuing forward with it here. It involves Phantom Stranger, Pandora, Justice League Dark, and this book. All in all, that's all happening. As for this issue, it's just a really fast read. I think it's just a matter of they needed to get to a certain point. They had to basically cut this arc short, or just kind of wait until Forever Evil's done to the point where they're going to continue it. But I do find it interesting that because of how this stuff sort of ended, they're left John without any real sort of magic. He's very much depowered at this time. So interesting to see how that's going to turn out there. All in all, I'd say this book is probably just like a flat 7. Not a whole lot happens. It's a very fast read. Obviously, the big thing that happens is Mr. E is taken off the board, but because he's still locked in that sword, it doesn't really feel like much happens in the way of story progression. It's just kind of all right, we're putting this aside, we're putting it in a box, let's go deal with Forever Evil for a while, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we deal with that. So yeah, 7 for this. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this November 13th, 2013. And frankly, I don't really have much to say about next week's comics either, except for one of them, just one tiny little comic on there that is basically going to reshape how DC establishes itself in pop culture and changes the way that all of future comics are looked at from a monetary standpoint. But yeah, it's not really all that important, all things considered. So, looking at the next week's list, we've got Batman and Robin, Batwoman, Birds of Prey, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Supergirl, Green Lantern New Guardians, Wonder Woman, Animal Man, Pandora, and Forever Evil Rogues Rebellion. Now, out of those worth noting, obviously all of the Bat books are going to be 0-year issues. I believe that Pandora might be a Forever Evil Blight tie-in, or that might be next month's issue where that starts. Genuinely don't know, but I'm sure I'll find out by next week. And then Rogues Rebellion is self-explanatory. So, what was that comic that's going to reshape everything? Well, for the video listeners, you've got a visual cue, but for audio listeners, next week also has Harley Quinn number 0 coming out. Now, why does this specific comic require a number 0? I don't know. I have no idea what's special going into it. I do know it has 25 different artists on it, and I will not be naming them by name, but kudos, you did that. The other thing is that if I remember correctly from collecting all of these goddamn trades, it's just how surprisingly many Harley Quinn trades there are. Because not only is there the Harley Quinn main series, but by the time we hit the end, I think there's also 2 or 3 mini-series as well. And then add on top of that, their yearly free comic book day stuff almost always has Harley in it as well. So yeah, you're about to get a lot more Harley Quinn. That's really the turning point of this show. 115 episodes in, you're going to get nothing more but Harley. So enjoy that. I know that I might. Anyway, that's enough of that. We will get to it next week. As for now, if you have any thoughts on any comics I talked about this week, last week, any week at all, go ahead and hit me up on any of the many places that I am looking for comments about my show, such as Reddit, or Discord, or the YouTube comment section, or Patreon. I really should be doing a better job of selling that, but I don't see that money, so Patreon. Anyway, that's going to do it for me. Thank you very much for watching, listening, however you consume this podcast. Be sure to tune in next week. And as always, try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.